Bom dia, a gente está aqui para mais uma sessão do Wellbeing Journey da Leader Academy. Hoje eu convido o Michael McCarthy, que é professor de Harvard, e veio nos contar um pouquinho de psicologia positiva e mais outras coisas de como ser feliz no ambiente de trabalho. Nós vamos falar em inglês, mas vocês acompanham aqui com legenda. Hello, Michael. So I just introduced you, and I mentioned that you were a professor of professional executive development in Harvard, but you're way more than that. Uh, and I know that you bring happiness into the workplace. So I would like you to tell us a little bit about that. What is the importance of having happiness in a workplace? How to engage uh, the employees to have a positive workplace?
Well, bom dia, and thank you for having me on the show. The reason I was interested in positive workplace and is a class that I'm teaching at Harvard in executive ed is in 2016, I retired. I was 36 years old, and I had a successful money management firm, and everything looked great. In the United States, retire early, that's the dream. And it really was the American nightmare for me. I became really depressed. And what I hadn't realized is that I lost my meaning and purpose in life. And going around on vacation for the rest of your life is not meaning and purpose. I wasn't helping anyone. I was just being selfish and hedonistic, and it wasn't fulfilling. So I went to Harvard to take the positive psychology class there taught by Tal Ben-Shahar, and two things happened. One is I realized that uh, I had lost my meaning and purpose, and that was the core problem. Also, I had a bad diet, so I actually changed my diet. There's a great book by Dr. Julia Ross called The Mood Cure. And by changing my diet, I ended up getting the brain chemistry that I needed. And that inspired me to create the first food company in the world that helped people with anxiety and depression. It was called Booty Bar, Budi, and it was Sanskrit for Budaya or wise, because all the ingredients were wise and did something for the brain. And I thought, well, that'll be my meaning and purpose, helping people get happier by changing their diet. I thought I could scale with it. So I took the entrepreneurship and innovation class at Harvard to stay organized because I was procrastinating a lot. And making the company was amazing. It was the first company that I had made that wasn't focused on money. It was focusing on helping other people. And it was the most fulfilling experience of all the seven companies I've had. That was the most fulfilling because I was connecting with people and I was helping make the world a better place. It was also my least profitable company, no regrets. I was wealthy in satisfaction. And that's how I became a professor, was I was afraid of procrastinating again. And I went to the professor and said, can I take the class again? And he said, no, but you could be a grader and a teaching assistant. And I just kept getting bored with being the grader and teaching assistant. And eventually I became the professor. And then during COVID, um, well, actually, it was before COVID, I had started to work at another school, and on the first day, this was another college undergrad, my first two classes were 100 students, and
That's
20
awesome.
of those students, they were all female, came to me and said, I have an anxiety and depression problem. Can you help? And they were sharing that with me because I told them I became a professor because I got depressed being retired, and I have no problem being vulnerable. So I kind of made them feel psychologically safe to share with me. And I thought, wow, that's a lot. 20% of students are anxious and depressed. And then I went home and I thought, we had a lot of people from Latin America in our class. This school has about 150 different countries represented. It's like teaching at the United Nations. And I know that in Latin America, there can be some machismo with the men. And I thought, I wonder if the guys are just as depressed. They just don't want to share it because it was all women. I thought if 20% were women, what if the real number of anxiety and depression in my class is really 40%? And I went to the dean on the first day of work. No, I'm sorry, the next morning, second day of work. I went into the dean's office and I said, statistically, you're going to have a suicide here. And his eyes got huge. He's like, what do we do about that? And I said, well, just look at the data. You have somewhere between 20 and 40% of your student population is anxious and depressed. They don't have any family support because they just left their country for the first time. They don't have their pets. They don't have their friends. They're not terribly welcome in the United States. The United States is full of immigrants, and they've never welcomed anyone. I'm Irish and Italian. When the Italians came, they weren't nice to them. When the Irish came, they weren't nice to them. It's like the new ones just don't get treated well. And I said, they're 18. They don't have the skills. They don't have the resilience. They don't have the social support. They're vulnerable. So I taught a class on positive psychology to 150 students on campus. And I created something called, I've made this up. I created a thing called the 3 a.m. friend. It was a positive intervention. There's no evidence base behind it. I just made it up. And I said, hold up your hand. Think of all the people that you're willing to talk to or have call you at 3 o'clock in the morning if they have a problem. And so the hands were going up. Some were like three fingers, some were like 10. And I said, now show me how many of those people know that you are their 3 a.m. friend. You specifically said at 3 o'clock in the morning when you're really having trouble, you know that it's okay to call and wake me up. And all the hands go down. And I said, this is the problem with people who are feeling vulnerable. They feel like they're a burden. So if you really love your friend, call each one that you would be willing to call, have them call you at 3 o'clock in the morning, and let them know that when things aren't okay for you, I am here for you. And 2 months later, I got an email from a student, and he said, I prevented a suicide.
Wow.
Friend called, said he was going to take a bottle of pills, and remembered that he had gotten the 3 a.m. friend call from him a few months earlier, and went over to his house 3 o'clock in the morning, just chatted with him, and he didn't take his bottle of pills. And when I applied to University of Pennsylvania's Master of Applied Positive Psychology program, I got in. And they only take about 30 people a year. And the father of positive psychology is Martin Seligman. Um, it was like learning from Freud. And now Marty is giving the last class of his career at Penn, and I'm one of his teaching assistants. So every Tuesday, I help teach positive psychology to undergrads with the father of positive psychology. And now I really have meaning and purpose in my life. And my thesis was I had to move positive psychology in a positive direction. And I thought, people spend half of their waking life at work. And my generation had always been, here's your paycheck, do what I tell you to do, and I could care less if you're happy or not. I saw a real opportunity with Gen Z that I have a lot of respect for them. I know a lot of older generations don't understand them, but I feel that they have a higher ethical structure than my generation. They will quit if they don't like you. If they don't think that what you're doing is ethical, they'll leave without another job. And they really do want to be seen as whole people. And I thought, what if work was great? I mean, what if work was a great place
Why
to
not?
be? And that was my thesis. So I actually made a guidebook on exercises that you can do. And since it was during COVID, all the exercises had to be done either in person or online. They would only take a few minutes, and they wouldn't cost any money because corporations are always really big on saying no by saying we don't have budget. So I thought, I'm not going to get that objection. Everything's going to be free. And I've done it. Interestingly enough, I've done it for major corporations like Nissan, and also a lot of government agencies. So we've been called in to NASA when they did the Artemis launch. That was exciting. The FAA, the EPA, the Clean Air Act. And it's really interesting to be able to share really easy concepts to major organizations that are managing thousands of people and making those lives better, even though I'm probably not going to meet those people. Um, it's a fun job. I think I have the best job in the world,
Could you
and that's why I
could you
do it.
share one of those suggestions from your guideline?
Yeah, there's one of my favorite ones, and this was something that came from the EPA. It was a challenge. They said when we were in person, we had really good brainstorming sessions, very creative. And now we're all remote, and the creativity has dropped. And I remember that but Dr. Barbara Fredrickson from University of North Carolina became famous for the broaden and build theory, which was trying to figure out, why do we have positive emotions? Like, what's the point? Negative emotions like fear and anger can help with survival, and they can help protect you and prevent you from danger. And then you can procreate and the species survives. So we're kind of negatively biased, and that's why we survive, because we're always looking for danger. But the world is a lot safer than what it used to be. So Barbara was trying to figure out, why do we have positive emotions? And it turns out that by having positive emotions, you actually have greater peripheral vision, like physically in a positive emotion. When you're in a good mood, you'll have greater peripheral vision, and that increases creativity, because you actually physically look up and you look around and you start to connect things, because you literally see different things that you could connect in a brainstorming session. And when you're in a bad mood, you lose peripheral vision and you kind of look down at the floor. And the EPA was trying to figure out, why do we have such low creativity on Zoom? And I said, you're staring at the camera. You're staring at a point. You've lost your peripheral vision.
Your
You're not looking
focus.
up and looking around. Like, that's it. It's like, oh, it's physical. It's not anything else. It's a physical problem. And they go, how do we fix it? And I said, well, you have to have an anchor day where everyone comes into the office. And that anchor day is a brainstorming day. And a lot of people did not want to come into the office, because they would come into an empty office and be on a Zoom call with everyone else, because they didn't have an anchor day. They could choose whatever day they wanted. You should not allow people to come any day they want if it means they're going to come into an empty office, because then they get resentful and say, well, what was the point of that? So you should only come into the office when there is a purpose. And brainstorming is a purpose. Coming in to have really great lunch where we all bring in food for each other is a purpose, because I'm noticing that with hybrid and remote work, culture's being lost. And there are people that are in the workforce, Gen Z, that have never been in an office. And we don't get that. The older generations don't realize, they've never seen culture. They don't know what it is, and they're not valuing it. And it's really an interesting challenge for me to see, how do you actually navigate this one. But I would say, like, one of my favorite ones is, if you're going to have a brainstorming session, you would do it in person versus on Zoom, because of peripheral vision.
That's amazing. And it's so simple.
It's very simple. Yeah, yeah. Even now, if you had to do remote, and there's no way you're going to do it in person, let's say it's a global company, get rid of Zoom and have people on an audio call. So what I would do instead is, so let's say that you and I would team up. Let's say we have a team of 10. We would do dyads. So you and I would put on our headphones, and we would go take a walk wherever we want to walk. So I like the ocean. So I would go walk along the ocean. If you like to walk in the park or walk in the woods or walk with your dog, you would go do that. And we would just talk together. We would get our ideas, and then we would then present our ideas into a larger group. So let's say it would be a phone call of 4 people. That's probably the max, because that gets a little confusing. And then you share these better ideas, and then you could go back onto Zoom where people have these more developed ideas. And for your introverts that are in your group, uh, people would actually list out ahead of time, ahead of the meeting, what the ideas were, so that the introverts could spend time thinking about it. The extroverts, like, man, I'm really an ambivert. I go back and forth. You could throw out an idea to me and I can run with it. Other people need to think about it. So being really thoughtful about how others want to interact with you is also important. So the fun part of my job is that people give me these challenges, and I just make up policies and exercises to do based on the research that I learned. at University of Pennsylvania. And this is uncharted territory for all of us. And I think it's fascinating. I think that we can make the workplace an amazing place. And a lot of people kind of see it as annoying, this hybrid, remote, no one's really happy. And I'm like, could you just look at the opportunities that we have in front of us and do something with it? So I think it's kind of fun. I think what's happening now is fun.
I like it. You just gave us a based, science-based information on why we need to open our horizon, right? It's physically, it's our optical field. And what you described, talking in pairs and then in quartets, is one of the liberating structures. I don't know if you're familiar with that technique, but that's also a technique on getting introverts to put them into the word. And walking is one of the suggestions for negotiation, because when yes, because, and for two reasons. One is because when we walk side by side. So we are walking together towards a place, a purpose. So it's not that we are one against the other. We are together walking towards a direction. And we keep it. So that makes us, because negotiation is not us one against the other. It's both of us within a circumstance, and we have to figure out a way to transform that conflict into something that is not a conflict. So that's, we are, whether we like it or not, we are bonded into that situation. So, and also walking is about the physical movement that we need as human beings.
I love that. I love that because I also teach negotiation, and I tell I do a poll in the beginning, raise your hand if you think that the counterparty is your enemy. And usually over half the room views them that way. And I said, if you're trying to sell a house and there's only one person that's interested in your house, it's not very helpful to view them as the enemy.
Michael, let's going back to the positive psychology. I would like to have your takeaways on how that affect the workplace. How can we make people more engaged? Because engagement, in a way, is the base for having a nice culture. If, like you were talking about it, we were talking about it, like if someone works willing to leave, there is an impact on the whole environment. So what would you suggest to engage employees and bring this positive happiness culture into the workplace?
I would be much, much more thoughtful and slower about the hiring process. So two things I would do in the hiring process. The first one would be, I would only hire for meaning and purpose. So one interview question would be, how does working at our organization fulfill your personal meaning and purpose in life? And just see what they say. And if it's not something thoughtful, that's going to be informative. It's going to be, if they give an answer like, well, it's close to work, or I can walk to work, or you have a really great retirement plan, that's not great. And I actually learned this from the co-founder of Moderna, Dr. Bob Langer, who's the pioneer in creating mRNA technology. And when he made the COVID vaccine, we interviewed him on our podcast, and I asked him, how many people quit during COVID? He said none. I said, did you have to give any raises? No. Did you give any vacation time? No. Any bonuses? No. How'd you do it? He said, we only hire for meaning and purpose. And when COVID happened, people saw it as an opportunity to do their life's work. And I was like, wow. So hire for meaning and purpose. The second thing is give the autonomy of the department that's going to take in that person. So let's say Joseph is applying to a job at Apple. Instead of the human resources department interviewing Joseph and then saying Joseph is better than the other applicants and sending them to that department, send Joseph to that department and let the department decide if they want to hire Joseph. So you could send your final three candidates. So let's say it's going to be Joseph, Jane, and Maria. Send those three people in for a week. pay them, pay them with the understanding that the team is going to pick. When the team picks the right person, they're going to be intrinsically motivated to make sure that they fit in. And they're going to be fitting in on culture and are you really a team player? And sure, it is a bit fake because you're only there for the week and you're trying to be impressive, but you have a lot of different people with a lot of neurodiversity on that team that are seeing different things about each person. They're going to pick up a lot more from that exercise. The other is, when you are looking for an applicant, ask your team first, do you know anyone that would want to be a part of this team? And even without saying it, they're going to be doing the cultural filter of, okay, well, I've Maria and John are looking for a job. Oh, Maria wouldn't like this job. No, 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 no. But John, John would like it. John would fit in. So asking existing employees, because if you don't fit the culture, you're not gonna fit it. The other one is that I would only hire for optimism. So there is a assessment you could take called the LOT-R, LOT-R. It's very short. You can get it for free online. And you really want to hire people who are optimistic because they're going to be better brainstormers. They're going to get along well with other people. Now, in a team, let's say a team of 5, you do want to have at least one pessimist, no more than one, to keep the group grounded from an echo chamber. But when you hire for optimism, you tend to get people who are more productive. They also earn more money, live longer. And if you hire for optimism and meaning and purpose, and you give the team that they're going to work with the autonomy to make the final hiring decision, you prevent so many problems of trying to engage people. You get the hiring right first. You don't have to do a lot of cleaning up afterwards. So I would say be really thoughtful about your hiring.
Good. And what about the current workforce, right?
Yeah. So it's like, oh, well, you're here.
You're here already.
Now what do we do? So what I would do is that I would sit down with them and I would do an exercise called Ikigai. So Ikigai is from Japan. It stands for the reason for being. And it's basically 4 intersecting circles that you will have Ikigai, or the perfect life, the perfect job, if you do what you love and you're good at it and the world needs it and you get paid for it. And when you're missing one of those circles, it becomes you can actually diagnose and predict what's going wrong with someone. Typically, the biggie that you're going to get is you don't love what you do, and that's the worst one to not have, because a lot of people will get a job for the money, and they get imprisoned by money because now they have a nice house, they have a nice car, maybe the kids are in college, and for them to go to another job that really fits their meaning and purpose very often means you're not going to make as much money, and they won't do that. But you can be miserable and rich at the same time. And when people don't have the love circle, that is really indicative of 2 things. One is you may want to consider working somewhere else. And that's okay, because the employer is not happy with you, the employee is not happy. But before we get to that point, I would do what we call job crafting. And I know we had chatted about that a little bit before we started the podcast today. And that's really just looking at your existing job through a different lens. So it's not like you're going to change the job at all. You're going to change how you look at that job. And if you can do effective job crafting, it will work. And job crafting can be hard. I was working at a college where the students were very wealthy, like really wealthy, bodyguards, chauffeurs, that kind of thing. And they just didn't care. They were not engaged students, most of them, and they were just going to go back home and be rich again and run the family business. And it really dragged me down by thinking, I'm not making a difference. I don't matter. I'm wasting my time. Where's my meaning and purpose? And when I did job crafting, I realized that I was focusing on my disengaged students, trying to engage them, and I was ignoring my engaged students. And when I flipped it and said, you know what? I can't be fully present for 50 students in a classroom, meaning available for office hours and meeting. I really could give a lot of attention to maybe 5, where I'm meeting you on weekends, and we're going out for coffee and that kind of thing. And I thought, that's about as many engaged students as I have. So I focused on the engaged students, and the disengaged ones, I thanked them because I didn't have the time for them and I wasn't going to make a difference with them. So all I did was change my focus. Instead of focusing on what was wrong with my class, I focused on the ones that were right. And so now my policy with my students is I will match your level of engagement in this class. If you're super engaged, I'll be super engaged. If you could care less, I'll match you there too. And so I'm still working there, and I have a lot of peace of mind. So I would say you would do the job crafting with a person based on the ikigai that they have. And if you're not good at your job, that one's easy to fix. Yeah, that one's just basically training. So you can fix things, and that's what I would do pretty much with the Ikigai training. And if it looks like it's not a match and we're not going to change this, then give them the opportunity to go look for another job peacefully, not have to sneak around. And then you start looking for someone and you start hiring the right way. Hire for meaning and purpose and optimism.
Backwards.
Yeah.
And thank you. But all of that refers to either an individual that is willing to look inside and get to know, like have some self-awareness and move on to a better lifestyle, like is interested in growing, or
Mhm.
it also relates to a manager that is interested in keeping a good environment, a good culture for the team. But what about those managers that are not interested? Because I see a lot still in companies, managers or the leadership that is like, it's working that way. I don't care. It's their problem. So maybe you could bring us a little bit of your experience with the generational conflicts on what to do with those managers that are still resisting.
Sure. From the research that I've looked at, I think the biggest problem is the manager layer, because 70% of an employee's performance is going to be impacted by the manager. So if it's a really great supportive manager, that employee 70% is going to bump up because of that. If the manager doesn't really care or is complaining, that's going to rub off on the employee. It's like humans are infectious. I can cheer you up if I'm in a good mood. I can drag you down if I'm in a bad mood. We're basically just spreading to each other. So 70% of your performance is going to be based on your manager. Now, also, 55% of managers in the United States are looking for another job. Only 22% of managers trust the organization that they work for, and only 15% of managers are comfortable managing remote or hybrid, which means most people don't have a good boss. And it's the same diagnostic with the boss. The boss is an employee as well, because there's someone above that person. It's the same thing. You sit down with them with Ikigai and say, okay, where in these 4 circles, I love what I do, the world needs it, I'm good at it, and I get paid for it. What do we need to fix? And here's the interesting thing. A lot of those managers did a good job before COVID. When COVID came and everything went remote and hybrid, they don't know how to do it. And so the good news is the Ikigai circle that they're missing is the good at circle, and that's the easiest one to fix with training. So the
That's
next thing that I'm moving into is teaching people, how do you manage people hybrid? Because what they're doing now is really annoying. They bug you. They micromanage you. Hey, are you sitting at your seat? Do I see you working? There's software that can see whether or not you're tapping the keystrokes. There's software
insane.
that will see whether you're moving the mouse. But since I teach employees, they've all hacked around it. They have GIFs where they do a screensaver and it looks like I'm there looking at you and moving my head, but I'm really not. There's a little machine you can buy online that will move your mouse when you're not there. So it looks like you're clicking on your mouse. And I sit there and I said, why don't we take the advice that we got from the CEO of Rico USA, who manages 14,000 people. He said, work where you want, how you want, the way you want. I am not going to measure your input, but I will measure your output. And I would, since this is a new world, go to your employees and say, listen, I'm your boss. That's the way it is. And my job is I work for you to make you do a great job. I want you to love your job. I want you to love working here. I want to support you any way I can. Through the lens of I work for you, what can I do to make your job better? So you flip it and ask them. I cannot believe how many managers guess at what they think the employees need for engagement, and they try something. I said, how about we flip it? Go ask them.
It's
Have them
even
have a meeting.
easier.
Yeah, just ask them. Have a meeting. You don't go there. You can't be in the meeting because you might shut them down if there's not enough psychological safety in the room. But let those people decide what are 5 changes that we want to make in the organization that would make us like this place better, and commit to an experiment of doing at least one of those for 2 weeks. So you make the commitment ahead of time, so you know that you can be trusted, and you do it. So if they say, well, we're going to make the workday start at 10 a.m. instead of 9 a.m., okay, we'll try it. And you put down the key metrics of, I need the deadlines met, I need the quality to stay high, and I want no complaints from the customers. If you hit those 3, I don't care when you work. Let's do the experiment. And if the experiment works, make it policy. If it doesn't, you debrief, why didn't it work? What didn't we see that we see now? Okay, what's the next experiment? What's number 2 that we're going to do? And you just keep doing it. You just keep doing experiments, and you give people agency and autonomy. They will love you. If people can create their own workplace environment, their own culture, why wouldn't they love you?
We get out of that's what I call the uh, pirates parrot boss, right? The one that is like over there, telling what to do. And then we move to the assignment boss that gets an output. And what you're telling, in addition to agency, I think there's a lot of accountability, because the person, it becomes less patriarchal, and it becomes more adult in a way.
I would say consider the possibility that your employees are much smarter and much more capable than you think, that they might be bored, they might be resentful, and maybe that's why their performance isn't where you want it to be. Just be open to that it might be you. And it's easy to fix. It's easy to fix. So I see it all as an opportunity. I think we're in a really interesting time in our lives where we can work from anywhere. And I'm just shocked that so many people see it as not a great thing. They keep comparing themselves to other people. Oh, well, they're completely remote. This one's got it, has a better deal than I do. What I would like to share with the audience today is a lot of people are saying that they like remote work and they want to keep it. They don't want to go back to the office. I understand that. But a lot of people who work remote are lonely. And it
True.
makes sense. They're alone. They don't want to admit it because they think it's going to be weaponized against them. So I would say managers should be spending some time making sure that the remote workers are getting what they need to combat loneliness, and also be open to the fact that maybe all the answers for your happiness and well-being don't come from work. And also do some
That's,
across the
yeah.
board policies of, let's bring back the weekend and be mindful of what you do. So if I'm your boss and I say, hey, take the weekend off, you don't have to email me. But if I email you on a Saturday or a Sunday, and I say, don't feel, you can email me back on Monday, what I'm saying is not my behavior. And what you take in is, if I want to succeed and be a manager, I need to work on the weekends because that's what I see my boss doing. And with them telling me to take the weekend off, that's for the worker. So it doesn't work to do that. You have to shut down the email server and say to everyone, no one emails anybody Friday at 5 p.m. to Monday at 9 a.m., including me, unless the building is burning down. No one. And you don't do it either. And then everyone can relax. It's like you really relax on a holiday because you know everyone has the holiday off. But on the weekend, so I think you really have to firewall your work from your playtime. And playtime is not playtime. It's precious time. Humans humans
Yes.
need to thrive, and we need to take care of ourselves. And if that means you're playing with your dog or your kid or taking a walk, that's important. It's not goofing off. I think we need to see more value in it, that we need that. And being a more of a whole well-being person, you're going to bring a better you into the office. So making sure that you're good at home is going to increase the probability that you're going to do well at the office.
Wow, there's a lot to unpack there. We were almost going into the smartphones impact into our days, but that's another conversation.
Sure.
Michael, I think our time is almost up. I would like you to ask if there's something else you would like to add. Maybe considering you've been to Brazil so many times, based on what you know on Brazilian culture, is there something that you might want to consider?
I think what we could learn from Brazil is it's a good idea to hug each other. I get more hugs in a week in Brazil than a year in Boston. And
Indeed,
it's almost like people are afraid of like committing the crime of like touching inappropriately. And humans are humans. We're tribal. We need to be held and to feel good. And I really the people that I work with in Brazil, I consider them more my family and friends than my coworkers.
that's
And we hug
amazing.
each
Thank you.
other before I go on the stage. The group that I work with in Brazil, they're members of a church, and they pray for me before I go on the stage
Mhm.
that I do well. And they're really sincere. There's a lot of Americans that go to church just
I
because
did that
they want to keep
today.
the score. People in Brazil, the ones that are spiritual, they really mean it, and it feels good. I like being there, and I think we should do more of what Brazil does. Be more spiritual, give each other a hug, and see each other as human beings. So I think we can learn from you, actually.
That's amazing. I actually did that before joining this call. I prayed to be of service. So
Yeah, I think we need more of that. I think we need more of that. So I think Brazil's doing some good stuff, and also not worrying so much about being there at 9 o'clock. 9:05 is fine. My blood pressure's lower when I go to Brazil. It's okay. We have plenty of time.
thank you. Thank you. That was
Thank you
amazing.
for
Thank
having
you so
me.
much.